be the sun, I'll be the stars in your sky, I'll be your goon as your beauty dies with you. Nothing wants me like you do. You'll be my beast when the night falls on you. I'll be your queen. Of your heart, I want you to know. Of your heart, I'm not ready to go. Do you believe in my heart? You're the chosen one. Do you believe?
Hey everyone, Crystal here with Gecko Diva, and welcome to Coffee and Cresties After Dark, our second Genetics Unplugged episode where we're going to talk Empty Back and Superstripe. So I'm going to bring in our hosts, or my co-hosts for the evening. So I got Quincy here from Gecko Nerd,
Hello, hello.
and David from Tiki's Geckos.
What's
And
up? What's up?
thanks for joining
What's
for
up?
the chat. It's awesome to have these live chats and to really be able to kind of, discuss things with people in the group. And I know you both have been really working with Empty Back projects. So who wants to start and talk a little bit about your love of Empty Back and Superstripe? I guess, David, you have both, right?
Yeah, I do have both. I have a lot of different groups going this year, and I'm breeding super empty backs to super stripes and a whole bunch of other stuff. So it's going to be an exciting year for sure.
And you Cal's in here saying that they'll start. I'll start. And Quincy, you've been working with some Empty Back projects as well.
Yes, a lot of empty back projects going on. Just trying to make some new colors out of them, some real black ones, bring in the hyper tangerine reds. Just trying to make something unique.
Yeah, and today we're going to look at a whole bunch of different pictures and kind of, give our thoughts. Not saying that this is, the law and this is what it is, but kind of share, our findings. I know Empty Back for me was something I just kind of fell into when I started breeding projects and was like, what is this that's popping up in my collection? And then I kind of, went all in this project now. And I'm trying to, same as you guys, right? Trying to take a different spin on it and see how it's going to work with different things. So before we start looking, actually, I'll bring up the first picture. And who wants to take away on the explanation of how this works? Because I know, especially the super stripe stuff is a little controversial, right? On how it's, I guess, showing up on in combos and such.
Anytime anybody says that word controversial, I just puts a smile on my face.
Here, I'm going to bring you back full screen. David has the awesome shirt today. Guys,
there you go.
Yes.
it's just Geckos. So this is our night reminder. Okay, when this conversation's happening, it's just Geckos. And we're
Yeah,
just having fun with it, right?
yep. Exactly.
So who wants to explain? Because you guys are way more versed in the vocabulary and such on explaining the
So
genetic side of it. Take
I'll
it away.
start. I'll start since that's my picture. So on top there, you could see a clear example of a het empty back or an empty back, and then on the bottom, we see a very nice, clean example of a super empty back. So basically, the heterozygous version, the single gene version of the empty back, you will see that, especially towards the base of the tail, towards the bottom there on the left side, you'll see that the base colors start to peek through and then like little blotches of pattern throughout the dorsal all the way up to the top in between those pinstripes. And then, on a perfect super empty back, you'll see basically all those dorsal markings get erased and you just left with the pinstripe scales. So I think that's a very simple way to put that.
Awesome. Anything to add, Quincy?
Yeah, I mean, empty back reduces the pattern color, right, overall. In the homozygous form, like we see there is like a perfect example. You just see the pins that are highlighted. It's also supposed to enhance the pins, as well as, you know, we see markers on them like the stripe down the tail. We see the stripe down the belly. So there's a lot of components to it. I think that's a perfect example right there.
Do you
Yeah.
find too? I've seen like those little hashtag, the equal signs, the little marks down the tail. Sometimes that happens as well, that you'll see on
Mhm.
some of them, but it's not necessarily consistent.
The what? The equal sign?
Yeah, yeah, like on down the tail, you have like two little dashes, and then further down, you might have another two little dashes that looks like a little equal sign. So I've noticed that too. I have a picture later on. I can kind of
Okay, yeah,
and
I'll
spot
have
it
to
out.
see that.
But yeah, I've noticed on some of the empty backs will have that. Before we go to the next picture, let's just say hi to people in the chat. So we have Celtic Reptiles in the chat. Thanks for joining.
Is it Celtic or Celtic?
I don't know.
Gecko.
I don't know, man. Okay, is this the Canadian thing that I'm saying? Just like when we say asphalt instead of
In
asphalt,
in America, we say Celtic. All right.
Celtic. And here I'm like Celtic, kind of like when people make fun of me when I say asphalt. It's just the way we pronounce things. Everyone, I'm Canadian.
Like the Boston Celtics, I would assume.
True.
Bobby's here.
That makes sense. Bobby's here. How's it going? Like we have
Uh,
New Cal.
What's up? What's up?
Cassandra's in the house. And we have a quiet chat today. It'll start pumping up once there's questions coming up. Rouge River's in the house. And then we got Highland one a Geckos. And
Nice.
Newcal actually comes in with a question right off the bat. Can you guys start off explaining the difference between Empty Back and Superstripe? Make them both and don't know the difference. So I think that's our next picture actually. Let me see here. There we go.
Yeah. So I would just describe I would describe it this way. A super stripe is an empty back, but an empty back is not always a super stripe. Okay. So as you can see with the bottom picture, that's a clear example of a super stripe where there's a very well defined uh, lack of markings down the dorsal, but there's still some like fat between the pinstripes and the emptiness, if that makes any sense. So I tend to see that, especially in the super versions of the super stripe, you see that peak towards the neck and the crest,
Mhm.
like right there, and there's a peak instead of like just a wide gap like you see on the top picture of the super empty back. Okay, now sometimes um you know, these are kind of like very picture perfect examples, but as we know, there's so many different variables when we're breeding these animals. There's so many other genetics that come into play. So if for example, if you have a lot of tigering, those lines aren't going to be as straight. They're going to be more jagged, and it'll be a little bit harder to tell. But I always take it back to that if I'm not entirely sure if it's a super empty back or a super stripe. I just try to look at the neck area, and if it's the peak where it's very thin and you see like a thinner line and there's still some of that cream surrounding the borders of the pinstripes, to an extent, it's a super stripe. And then obviously, if it has less markings and that wide gap of emptiness by the neck, I would call it a super empty. Again, these
Okay.
are talking. We're talking about both homozygous versions of the gene, not necessarily the heterozygous yet, because then it gets a little bit more complicated. But when you see it like this, it's a little bit easier to understand.
Okay. Do you find that with the empty back, like you can also kind of get that line at the back of the head as well, where it kind of connects where there
With heads, with heads.
okay.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like with supers, I see it as well, but it's not like a thin line. You see, like on the bottom, it's a thin line, and it starts off and it widens a little bit. Typically, when I see it on a super empty back, that peak, it's a lot wider. Instead of the peak being like this, it's like this. You know, it's a lot wider. But that's from my experience. I don't know if Quincy wants to, you know, talk about that from his experience.
Yeah, I mean, on super EBs, I just see that the heads are also erased. With the super stripe, I don't think we typically see that. Am I wrong?
I would agree with that most of the time. I do have super stripes though that don't that get that that it erases some of the head markings, but
Mm.
typically we do see super empty backs. Their whole top head marking gets erased, whereas super stripes keep that cream on top.
Okay.
Yeah.
Very cool. Hopefully this will help people understand more too, right? Because it's been such a hot topic, I find, where people are like, there's a lot of questions around, and especially when you're seeing in the groups and stuff, is this an empty back? Is this a super stripe? So hopefully we can kind of provide a little bit of wisdom through these examples and helping people kind of guide them along and seeing the difference. So this is a different angle, but these are both super stripes, correct?
No, no.
No?
Well,
Okay.
yes. One's a het. The one on the right is a het, and the one on the
Okay.
left is a super.
Okay. So the one on the right has the one copy of the EB gene, but then you
Yes.
having the super stripe in the combo, whereas the one on the left is the super, the
Yeah.
two copies of the EB gene.
Yeah.
Awesome. So you're finding when there's one copy of empty back that it still kind of has that, I guess, pattern in the center, right? It's not as clean.
Yeah, yeah, well, again, it can vary so much. I try to put like almost perfect pinstripes and quad stripes because they have very reduced tigering, so it's easier to see like the pattern going down the line in the middle. But once you start adding tigering, it like, it makes it more jagged. But the one on the right, as you can see, it's not a clear, defined stripe down the middle. It's more of
Mhm.
like, there's still little patches of pattern here and there, and it's almost like somebody just like erased here, there, here, there, here, there, all the way down the back.
Yeah. Awesome. And these ones are a little far to tell, but I guess they would basically be similar to
So
this.
yeah, so those, is there any way you could zoom in a little bit?
Zoom in. It'll be blurry. Can I
Okay.
make it a big picture? Yeah, no, it's the same size.
Okay, well, the one on the left is a super empty back, the one on the right is a super stripe. But
Okay.
the one on the left has more cream pattern. So what happens is the cream kind of wants to fight back, and it's on a like playing for dominance with that emptiness. So it's kind of
Okay.
like creeping in from the sides, but it's, you gotta if people watch that video, they'll see it and they could see it better.
Okay. And you can see the one on the right you said was
A
super
super
stripe,
stripe.
right?
Yeah,
And you can
yeah.
see the difference, I guess, on the head pattern as well, right? There's that more of a, I guess, a cream on the head or
Yeah, this is not like the best example of what Quincy was talking about because like some super empty backs just have like that those markings on the head. It'd just be
Mhm.
like the base color basically. So it'll be like
Okay.
black also, but that's not a good example of it.
Okay.
Super stripe. That's the animal in those in two pictures ago when we were seeing the super stripe with the super empty back, that's the super stripe animal that we were seeing.
Okay.
You
Hmm.
can see the nice line down the tail on that one.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And
Yeah,
what we have here.
so that one, it's definitely a het, but I'm not I'm not entirely sure if it was a super stripe or or an empty back het. But that was an animal I hatched like in 2012 or something.
Okay.
I don't know. Yeah. But
So
that's
I
a
mean,
yellow base too.
they I guess like it's one of those things too that can be a little bit difficult until you start seeing them mature, right? Like, are you finding that it's easier for you to kind of identify the difference between, like, of what, I'm trying to find the words. Like, so are you, when you're having super straight and play with empty back, are you finding it easier to identify as they mature and get older and the pattern kind of expresses more? Or are you trying to identify them as their hatchlings because you're finding it easier then?
Honestly, it just depends. If they're heads, is when it could get a little confusing for me.
Hmm.
When it's like the homozygous version, I think it's pretty clear cut for me at least. But when they're heads, that's when it could get a little confusing. Because that, I would say, I'd be leaning more towards het super stripe than I would be het empty back. But, you know, um, I mean, I know it's an empty back because that animal I've bred already. But like just looking at the picture, it'd be hard to tell, you
Yeah,
know?
and just and for not to confuse people when you're saying like hat super stripe, like super stripe plays different, right, than empty back. Like maybe we can give our thoughts or you share your thoughts on that, like how it's working. Like is it similar to empty back? Have we been able to have super stripe without empty back? Like how has that kind of been working with
I've
the findings that you've had?
So all my super stripe animals always produce empty backs, but I have empty backs that don't always produce super stripes. So that's why I was saying a super stripe is an empty back, but not every empty back is a super stripe
Yeah.
because I always get empty backs out of my super stripe groups, but I not always get super stripes out of my empty back groups.
Okay. So it really depends on who you're pairing it to, right? Like if you're pairing, let's say, an empty back super stripe to something that doesn't have super stripe in it or even empty back in it, then your results are most likely going to be empty backs is what you're going to see, right?
Yeah.
Like you're not going to see that super stripe. Does it usually transfer over or do you need to have it paired to another animal that has empty back?
Well, like I said, I think Super Stripe is like variation of I think Super Stripe is a variation of Empty Back. So you definitely need Empty Back there if you want to produce Super Stripes. Now it just expresses differently, but that's my theory. Um, I'd be curious to hear what Quincy has to say, like how he views it, because that's just how I believe it.
Yeah, I mean, in my experience, I work with a lot of empty back. I haven't worked with super stripe specifically, but in my empty back pairings, I have produced animals that look like super stripe. In my opinion, it's a combo of empty back. But until I work with super stripe directly and try to isolate it, I'm not going to say 100%. I know it's most people have the same theory.
Yeah, again, I don't think it's something separate by any
Hmm.
Right,
means. I don't
right,
think it's a separate gene or anything. No.
right.
Um, it may be something kind of like the caps and the sables or something where it's on
Allelic,
the
yeah.
same allele. Yeah, exactly.
Mhm.
That it's allelic. So I don't know.
Newcal says that makes perfect sense. I've been making both of them for a while and couldn't figure out why.
Yeah.
That'll be $20.
This is making a lot more sense now. Rouge River is saying, if breeding super stripe to super empty back, what would you get? Which one dominates?
So after this year, I'll be able to tell you more accurately. But I've gotten like previous years, I've done it, but I haven't like what's it called? Like taken like kept track of it, So I've
Yeah,
I've just kept like mental track of it, but I haven't actually kept track of it on paper. So after
yeah.
this year I will.
And you have so many projects you're working with, so unless you're
Oh my
keeping
God,
track of
yeah.
it on paper, then it's like, oh yeah, what happened? That's right.
Yeah.
Like, it's a lot to keep up with.
And I used to think I could remember everything. I still am pretty good, but like I used to like I could go into my gecko room and I could look at geckos and without seeing the labels, I could tell you what groups they came from. for the most part. In the first 6, 7, 8 years, I could do that no problem. But as like I'm no longer feeding the animals. I'm no longer on top of them every single day. So as I've spread myself, it's getting a little bit harder. So I'm like, damn, maybe I should write all the lineages down and all that stuff because I
Okay,
start
well,
to forget sometimes.
there's two things, okay? I noticed when I got older, now I hit 40 this year, so I'm like, now my memory is not as good as it used to be. And you're also a parent now, so best of luck to you.
Yeah, exactly. My
Yeah.
days are all jumbled up.
They one blends into the next, right? And you're like, oh, that happened 3 years ago? Oh yeah. It's like time is no longer, it doesn't exist anymore. It's just one day to the next.
Yeah.
So what do we got here?
So that would be what I would call a super stripe.
Okay.
Now that is it's a het super stripe, um, but you could see where it's not like it's a much thinner line
Mhm.
of lack of pattern down the middle, right? So that's yeah, that's what I would call a het super stripe.
So you're getting one copy of the empty back gene in this, and then the super stripe over it.
Hmm. Now that's a super stripe. And that animal, okay, so what what Quincy was talking about where the head like it erases the head pattern, that
Mhm.
animal's very young there. But now that animal today has no head pattern. So it's just like the cream of the dorsal and then a little bit of highlighted crests.
Okay.
So and that's a super stripe.
Okay. So you're finding it gets like different head stamps and weird things going on the head as well?
Well, I think it's kind of like I think it's similar to like Axanthics and Sables and Cappuccinos and stuff. It eats away at orange pattern.
Okay.
So um the cream tends to stay and the white tends to stay, but the orange pattern it tends to be erased. And you could see that not just on the head, but throughout the whole body. If you look at super empty backs, if you go through a bunch of super empty backs, you'll
Mhm.
see that most of them have very little limb pattern or lateral pattern. And then when they do have lateral pattern, typically when you see a like let's say a lateral stripe or something or some lateral pattern, it's like a cream or if they're white out animals, it sticks out, it's very thick, kind of like that girl right there. But if it's just like regular orange markings, like orange pattern, it tends to be wiped out a lot of times.
Okay. Quincy, do you have anything you want to add to that or?
Yeah, I mean, like he said, it does erase a lot of the pattern color, specifically the orange pattern. And you'll
Hmm.
see on some examples coming up on the Super EBs, you'll see at least one or two where pretty much all the pattern color is gone.
Yeah. And I think it might be, oh, I think we have another one before. So what do we have here?
This is an empty back, really odd one where you can see a lot of the orange pattern that would have been on like an extreme Harlequin is being erased. And it's eaten up and it looks kind of pixelated, but this is not a pixel.
Like, disclaimer, not a
Not a
pixel.
pixel. Not a pixel.
And we'll get into talking about that later because I think that is like a huge thing, especially when we were talking about the head empty backs with no pinstripe, right? So,
Right.
like, it does eat away at that pattern, and I've noticed that too with my empty backs. That especially if you're having like the Harlequin patterns come up, it kind of pixelates them without
Right.
being a pixel.
Yes.
That's a nice one.
So the Quincy, is this one of yours? I can't
Yep.
remember whose
Yeah.
this is.
Yeah. She's growing
I,
up to breed next season. But yeah, the head on her is erasing a lot more than it is there in that picture. She's like below 20 grams. But yeah, her head pattern is pretty much completely erased now.
Yeah.
And then
That's
you're
a
now
cl-
you're
that's
sorry,
a
go ahead.
clear cut example of a super empty back.
Hmm.
And guess what you can see on the tail? The little equal sign is starting. It's
Yeah,
it kind of like blends together, but you can kind of see the two little dashes there.
and you can see on her sides, typically this would be a white wall.
Yeah.
You can see how it's being erased.
Yeah.
Awesome. Before we go into the next picture, I am going to play a quick little ad. So if some of you who are listening haven't seen,
TikisGeckos.com.
oh, yeah. This whole thing is a Tiki's Geckos ad, okay? Gecko Nerd ad, like, come on. I don't know if you've seen the Epic. It's the Exotic Pet Industry Conference. It's this new online conference that's coming out. And it's free to register and it's super exciting. And I'm very thankful to be a media affiliate. So I'll play the short video so you guys can get all the info and we'll be right back.
It's called EPIC, the Exotic Pet Industry Conference, and it's free to register at epic.live. EPIC is over 20 special guests across 16 sessions covering industry trends, marketing, branding, podcasting, and YouTube. EPIC is for pet keepers and breeders. It's for gecko and invert lovers. It's for snake and spider lovers. EPIC is for anyone who enjoys these amazing animals. Did I mention it's free? Register now at epic.live.
So I've registered for it. Have you registered? I think Tiki's Geckos is part of it, right, David?
No, I'm not.
You're not?
But
Okay. I
no,
I
I'm
thought I
not.
heard
I'm
a
not.
rumor that you may have been, so I
No,
wasn't
no.
sure.
False rumors.
Well,
No, but I definitely want to tune in. I wasn't even aware of that, so I'll definitely tune in.
so then, yeah, it's going to be interesting, and it's free to register, and you can sign up for the sessions that you want to watch live, and then after that, you can go back and watch all the other sessions that you've missed. So it sounds like it's going to be. I think he said he wanted to do it twice a year. So it's nice to have some more information like this kind of stuff. Like, they're doing industry chats and
That's
all
cool.
sorts of cool things. And I think we need more of it. So it's awesome. Thanks for sitting through my ad and Tiki's Geckos, Gecko Nerd. You guys next time I'll send me an ad and I'll play it after.
Jeez.
Nice.
Oh, this big girl, she's nice.
Yeah, so
Is
this
it-
is the girl I was talking about where majority of her pattern color is suppressed.
Hmm.
Her head's almost completely erased, the dorsal. You can see the tail there has a nice line down the tail. She has a line down the belly. This is a perfect example for me. She's just her. She's paired right now. She also bred last season. She's making a lot of nice black base ones.
What did you put her to?
Another black base, empty back with tangerine. She has tangerine
A,
too,
s-
so she's
a
been
soup,
making that.
a
What?
super or a het?
Heck,
Nice. Okay.
yeah.
I think we're still all in this space where you're wanting to make some cool new stuff and that you all kind of wish that you had like a super one to put to it, but it's not made yet, or you don't have one up to size yet. And I on my end, I'm struggling with that too, and also we're limited what we have too in Canada, right? Like I either have to import it or really dig and try to find or make it myself. I mean, so and with new stuff that people are playing around and trying to put it in. I know Quincy, you're trying to put it in a whole bunch of different base colors as well, right?
Yeah, I mean, this girl, I could have paired her to a super, but she makes a really nice black base with a soft scale. So I just want it, and she has tangerine, one copy. So I know that putting her with another tangerine, I'll get that hyper tang. It's like neon orange on black is just crazy.
Are you both finding that there's certain like other traits that tend to linger on with empty backs, like things like tangerine or soft scale, or that seem to be kind of really prevalent in a lot of projects? Or
I think a lot of the empty backs are also soft scale, at least in my collection.
okay, how about you,
Um,
David?
Not for me, nothing in particular. Pinstripe, but
Yeah.
but
Haha.
nothing that I would say like that sticks out. But I will say one of the main guys that put empty backs on the map was AC, and he works with a lot of soft scales, so maybe that's why.
No, that's definitely why.
Yeah,
That's
Yeah.
definitely
exactly.
why. Yeah.
And he also has a lot of like the tangerine stuff too, right? And like the see-through
Exactly.
citrus
Mm.
and this bubblegum stuff. So you might see some of that tang stuff popping up. And I would imagine like I've seen some where like the parents, you don't really see the tangerine, but then when they start producing hatchlings, it pops out and you're seeing it in the hatchlings.
Yeah. What happens
Mm.
too is if it's uh if the tangerine is weak, you'll see it as a baby, but as it ages, it loses it.
Mhm.
So that's why that happens. So then you get an adult gecko and then you breed it and then you see these tangerine babies.
Well,
Yeah.
we really need to do a deep dive on tangerine.
Oh,
That's
let's
Yeah,
start
definitely a good
yeah,
marker for it. Yeah.
that.
yeah, that's an exciting one for sure. I think tangerines and empty backs, those two projects are taking like the lead in 2025 for me and my crested geckos. I have like a couple different groups and super exciting stuff for me.
It's funny you say that because it's pretty much the same on my end as well.
Yeah,
Those are the two main things while I'm waiting for some of the pixel stuff to grow up. It's mainly those two focuses.
nice.
And Newcal says that's where mine came from. When I started, I bought a few wholesale lot and raised them up and sorted out as they grew. Yeah.
Nice.
So now we got something that looks completely different on the opposite spectrum of the other stuff we were looking at, right? So Quincy, you want to take the reins on this?
Yeah. So this guy is an empty back, one copy. The color's just out of hand on him. Typically, like empty back is supposed to darken color. But this is pretty heavily stacked hypo with tangerine. That's why he, looks that way. He's been making lavender tangerine empty backs.
So that's an example of what I was trying to say where when you have a single copy, that's when it's very hard to distinguish some of these
Hmm.
genes. And because there's a lot of other things at play, I see there's the tangerine, but there's also, a bunch of other hypo at play and all these other things. But you could see that for that animal in particular, it looks like around there's like little spots of emptiness around the near the pinstripe scales, on the edges
Yeah.
of the pinstripe scales on the inside. And an animal like that, a couple years back, I wouldn't be able to look at that and say that's an empty back. Nowadays
Yeah.
I've trained my eye a little bit better, but that's an animal that I would consider hard to tell, especially if you don't have the experience, and if you haven't bred it. But yeah, there's so many empty backs that are so hard to tell.
Yeah. I
Yeah.
mean, he has just like the base of the tail, a very erased section
Yeah,
right,
Mhm.
right at the base of the tail.
yeah,
But yeah, the white pattern on this is very heavy, and I think that's the main component.
yeah, yeah. It's just white pattern tainted with the tangerine.
Exactly. Yeah.
So where do you him, Quincy? Like, are you still working? You're working him and like continuing with hypo and trying to make like super empty backs with him, or
Yeah, so he's going to be making lavender tangerine super empty backs.
nice,
Nice
bright?
structure on that animal as well.
Yeah.
Is that the one you paired to the other female?
No.
Okay.
No, this one I'm keeping with a really light base. I'm trying to get them really on the purple hue of lavender for the base.
Okay, gotcha.
Nice. And then we got another flashy one.
She's not fully fired up there. This is actually a darker base. Yeah, just a good example of empty back, homozygous form with tangerine.
So look, if you look on the neck of that animal, you can see what I was trying to say earlier, where
Yeah,
that peak, where the eraser, I call it the eraser, where the eraser starts, it's a lot wider than on the super stripe. The super
yeah,
stripe peak is a little bit thinner, whereas the super empty backs or empty backs have a wider peak.
yeah.
Gotcha.
It's
So they
really
still
flared
have
out.
a peak, but it's way
Uh-huh.
more. Okay.
Some supers don't. Some supers don't. So, because when it's a super, it will erase all the way up to the head pattern. So there's just a wide gap of, you could just follow the pinstripes and there's nothing in the middle. But sometimes you see that on some super empty backs and empty backs.
Yeah,
And
her.
sorry, go
Sorry,
ahead.
go ahead. Okay. Her head pattern, if you look at it closely, if I probably should get a good overhead shot of her.
It's
Um,
reduced.
her face and her top of her head is actually really reduced, and then she has that orange pattern. Well, it's white pattern with tangerine, closer to the nape of the neck.
Yes. And
Hmm.
we got Flawless in the house. How's it
What's
going,
up,
Flawless?
Flawless?
What's up? What's up?
Let's go. Good people right there.
Quincy, you can see the little equal
The
signs,
lines.
the lines
Yes.
on the tail on this one too, and it looks like it has
Yeah.
maybe a second one further down near the end of the
Hmm.
picture. Flawless, you missed the ad for Epic. I know that Flawless is part of Epic. Let's go for the next one here. So they just keep getting brighter and brighter, Quincy.
And lighter.
Lighter and
Yeah, this
lighter.
is this is what I was talking about when I was saying the really purple base lavender. Um,
So is that the female you're pairing to that now?
nope.
No.
Oh, okay, all right.
No, but they are in the same group. Um,
Yeah.
but yeah, I really love that lavender base with tangerine. It's so nice. Just want to keep making more like that.
Yeah. Yeah. The lavender and the tangerine pair very, very well. I would say that.
It's a nice it's like a nice compliment, right? Because you have kind of those purple hues and the orange, it just kind of gives that, it really pops, I find. That and when you're getting like a really dark base, it'll pop as well. I
Hmm.
like the contrast where you're seeing like where it's very visible at the.
Yeah.
So this one I kind of put in here. It's one that I had that I've been kind of struggling with and then I got some generational pictures of. So the top two pictures is the hatchling that I have that I'm growing out. The
Hmm.
one picture on the bottom left is the top is the dad to that hatchling with the sibling below it. And then to the right would be the parents of that dad. So the grandsire. So you can kind of see like, and I was talking to Quincy and I'd like your thoughts on that, David. So on the right, I was trying to figure out if that would have been the look of a super stripe with maybe one copy of Empty Back.
The one on the bottom right.
Bottom,
Bottom right.
yeah, the bottom right.
Yeah. So the top one on the bottom right. Is
The
that the one
dad.
you're referring?
I'm not sure if the top one on the bottom right is the female to it. I know for a fact the bottom of the bottom right is the dad. That I do know.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, that animal clearly has an empty back copy. And then the one on top of that one, so
Mhm.
the darker animal, that one, I would say is, that's when starts to get a little tough because the 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 emptiness towards the bottom of the tail, like towards the bottom of the dorsal, towards the tail, it looks very wide, but then at the very top, it thins out. But that could be just because it's a het. and it does have like already some of that head pattern missing. So I'd say those two animals on the bottom right are definitely het empty back.
Okay.
And then the one that you're growing out on top, that definitely looks like a het also.
Okay.
It's just the cream again, like we were saying in the beginning, everything else, you know, the empty back reacts to everything else that you put it with,
Yeah.
and the cream wants to take over those empty spots, and then you add the tigering in there from that animal, and that makes that it makes like a jagged, almost like a lightning bolt strike on that dorsal
Yeah.
instead
So
of
the one on the top, I have the mother here, and she's a harlequin, right? A soft scale. So you're really seeing a lot more of that patterning on the
tiger.
laterals, right? So that would make sense when you're looking at the dorsal of that animal, where it's going to be more kind of chewed, right?
Hmm.
Okay. And now we get into the cappuccino discussion.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
cappuccino seems to be one that's very confusing, right? Because you'll see a lot of caps with really prominent pinstripe that are not necessarily empty back. So who wants to kind of lead that chat?
David, you have a theory about this?
Yeah. So I kind of mentioned it earlier where I think cappuccino and the sables and the highways or all that stuff, that all eats away at the orange pattern. And you'll see because you'll hatch out, and Axanthic does too, by the way. So you'll see because you hatch out these orange, really nice orange cappuccinos or orange sables. And then as they start growing up, they start losing that orange. And then that's when you start to see the head fringe, and then which ultimately leads down the pinstripes. And that's because the cream tends to like accumulate along the pinstripe scales up to head fringe. In a regular gecko, the orange and the cream blend in so well you can't even notice that, and it just looks like that cream top of the head. But when you add cappuccino, it takes away the orange, so it just leaves the cream, and that kind of happens over time because when they hatch out, they look pretty pretty normal. If you're like if you're not don't know what you're looking at, but as they start to grow up, you'll see cappuccinos and frappuccinos that the head starts to you start to see that head stamp, and all that head stamp is the erasing of the orange pattern, and then it's leaving the white pattern. And that's why we see such striking whites and such striking uh creams on cappuccinos and sables. I mean, at least that's my theory. I could be wrong, but that's what I think. So that animal pictured there, I do not think it's an empty back. One thing I do notice about empty backs for whatever reason is they tend to be missing the bottom, a few bottom scales of the pinstriping.
Okay.
Um, Now, if you stack it on top of each other, you could get rid of that, obviously. But when you're first producing like either super empty backs or empty backs and they're not super strong, those genes or the pinstriping genes in that, you'll see that they have like good pinstripes, and then towards the bottom, the base of the tail, they're almost like missing pinstripe scales. That's something I've noticed about empty backs. Now, the only thing that would make me doubt myself into saying that that cappuccino is not an empty back is the missing scales right there by the base, where it kind of you can kind of see where there's like a dark line going
It's a
through.
line. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah, so that would be like the only question I would have, but looking at the rest of the dorsal, I would say I don't think that's an empty back cappuccino. I think that's just a nice pinstripe cappuccino.
Yeah. And I brought this up as a discussion, and I have to go back and actually see the parents to this gecko to see if
Oh,
the parent was an empty back. This one I purchased as an empty back cappuccino.
okay.
And I think
Well,
that's, and whether it is or not, to me is
you
no
got
different.
scammed. You
Well,
got scammed.
again, whether it is or not, like this person I got it from is great, and we're all just still learning, right? So at the end of the day, I think this was a good topic to bring up, because I do find that there is a lot of confusion with things like cappuccinos, and when you're looking at xanthics, for instance, you'll see a lot of animals that are being um, portrayed maybe as empty backs, or
Yeah.
and I think that's good information for people who are listening to know that in those cases it would be important to kind of see the parents, and to kind of see
I
if there's an empty back lineage there.
yeah. So if I see the parents of that animal, I can maybe, like, if there's one or both parents are empty back, I could be like,
Mhm.
oh, okay, then that is most likely an empty back cappuccino. But if I look at the parents and they're not empty back, then I could be like, okay, that's just a cappuccino working there, you
Yeah.
know?
For
Something
all
I
full
didn't,
disclosure, I bought this just as a cappuccino in my mind, because I wanted a cappuccino. Okay, because we
yeah,
don't have
no,
a whole
yeah, and
lot of them in Canada.
yeah, no, no, I hear you. And listen, I mean, some of this stuff is super confusing, so I'm not, if
Yeah,
somebody sold it to you as an empty back cappuccino, that's probably what they thought. And
yeah.
it could be, I still don't know, right, for
Mhm.
certain, but my theory is like that's probably not. But I also just noticed that cappuccino actually has Dalmatian spots, so you
A
could just
lot.
throw it in the trash
A
because
lot of Dalmatian spots. This thing just like exploded with Hey, maybe I want to put it in my Dalmatian lily white project. Okay. But yeah, it has a whole bunch. Like, it's covered in Dalmatian spots. It's actually kind of cute. Okay. I don't hate on the Dalmatian spots.
no, I don't. I don't. I'm just messing around because people get crazy about that stuff.
It was really funny because I had Robbie on the last episode, and he's working with some spots, and he says, I'm not working on spots, but I'm keeping things with spots. So I had him say it on the show. I'm like, you heard it here first, everybody. He's keeping spots.
That's funny.
It is funny because a lot of people I find are afraid of spots, right?
Because you know how many times I've had an animal, like let's say I have an animal for sale, and it's like this person's like, oh my God, this is a perfect animal for my project, da, 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 and they're looking it over, and then they turn it out around and they look under the foot, and there's like a single Dalmatian spot. They're like, it's not gonna work for my project. I'm like, I just want
You're
to
like,
like
please.
that. Yeah. So yeah, whatever.
Sometimes you have to pick and choose, and sometimes you have to overlook that one little spot if, like, it's the absolute
It
another like the perfect animal for.
it it's not even that. It's like if you pair that animal to a spotless animal, I mean, you're not you might produce some, like half of them that may have a couple spots, but they're not going to be anything crazy. And if you're doing this to, like, let's say if you have a particular vision, you could just pick and choose what animals you want out of that don't have spots out of
Mhm.
the offspring. But whatever. Rant
But
over.
then, and on that discussion, it's funny because I chatted with Robbie about it, and the thing is you can have two animals that are immaculate, that have zero spots on them, and then you'll pair them, and next thing you know, the hatchlings have spots.
Yeah, no,
Yeah.
so there was a theory going around that there's a form of Dalmatian that is recessive.
Mhm.
Hmm.
Um, and I've seen it from my collection myself, where I have two animals that do not have any spots, and they produce animals that have spots. So there's theories out there that it's an incomplete dominant. There's theories out there that, I don't know, whatever.
New
But
Cal,
it's interesting.
we're gonna talk about lilies coming down into the pictures. So he says I have a lily that looks. I don't know if it was a picture before or this one. Looks like this. I figured it was a super stripe. Can't figure it out. Okay, it might have been the picture before. What was the one before?
Also,
Oh,
another thing that people get really confused about is tricolors,
okay.
because the tricolor, so for it to be an empty back, you need to see the base color of the animal in the
Yeah.
dorsal. If you don't see the base color, if you see orange and mixed in with white or cream, then that's most likely a tricolor. So I see a lot of on the internet, I see a lot of people that post nice tricolors and they label them as empty backs. and it could get confusing because it could form that same type of like it could form in the same type of way where it kind of like
Okay.
creeps up the dorsal from the base of the tail, and it creeps up the dorsal and it's orange pattern. But um yeah, it's unless you see the base color of the animal in the dorsal, it's not an empty back. If you see orange and white, sometimes when the orange and the white color is, very kind of like blended in together. In other words, in not very good tricolors or just orange pattern animals or whatever, you don't notice as much. But in very distinct, like high quality tricolors, where you see the very distinct difference between orange and white, the dorsal will also show the orange and white. And then some people mistake that as empty back.
Okay.
Yeah, yeah. Good
I'd
point.
see
Yeah.
that for sure because it can have that look, right, where it's kind of
Yeah.
there's gaps and
Yeah,
spots where you're seeing the base come through.
exactly.
Mhm.
So this one here, I picked up this random one. It was not labeled or anything. So I'm thinking this one would be 2 copies of the gene for empty back.
Looks like it, but
I'm
have you
also
bred it?
thinking uh, she's going to go next season. So I have not bred her yet. Also thinking on this one would be a soft scale. But like it's hard to tell because I find that the pin is just so thin and she's just a
Do,
solid,
do, do you have a top picture of her? It
not
looks
on
like
here, no.
it looks to me like it could be a super empty back for sure.
It still has very void on the top, but it has a couple little lines that kind of cut through from one side to the other.
Yeah, and again, like there's so much that goes into it. There's so much variability, and I could see just by the laterals there that that animal has tiger influencing, because the laterals are like flames instead of a
Hmm.
straight line. So then that could be affecting the dorsal where you see that the markings in the middle there.
Okay, where it's
Mm.
kind of making it kind of go crossover.
Yeah, because the tigers, I mean, yeah, the tiger pattern um goes vertical on the gecko, and the pinstripe pattern pushes it horizontal. So
Hmm.
I kind of like compare it to gargoyle geckos. With gargoyle geckos, there's two base pattern types: striped and then reticulated. And the reticulated breaks up the pattern vertically, and the stripe breaks it up horizontally. I mean, I guess depends on how you're looking at the animal, but if you're looking at it like we're looking at this animal, so it's similar with cresteds.
This one's a little confusing for me because I think
Yeah.
I can't tell based on the photo if that dorsal is orange pattern or if that's base color coming through. I just can't tell.
Yeah, when and it's also the lighting as well. I can tell you that it's all the same color, really. Like
Yeah.
there's no difference. It's kind of
Mm.
like the way she is, and you can kind of see in some parts of the sides where it kind of goes orange. She's also kind of misfired in this one. Like she's
Yes.
not fired at all. She's fired
Okay.
down, but there's some spots of her that are kind of brighter than other spots, right? It's
Mm.
not the best picture of her. Like if she's fired up, she's really, really, really dark chocolate brown. And
Yeah.
sometimes she'll actually kind of be greenish in
Yes.
color.
Quick. Okay, that's a super empty back. No doubt about it. 100%. So look,
Okay,
Quinn.
you have to explain the method to your madness on this one where
I
you're like,
mean,
okay, that's what it is. So explain this to me.
Put my
I,
name on it. It's a super empty back. No, look.
Qualifying questions. What did I say that made
So,
you think
so,
yes?
okay. So this is why I say this. Obviously, this is this is another one of my theories in my mind. But so I have a couple super empty backs, and a lot of these super empty backs, when they misfire, it almost looks like it almost looks like, okay, so unfired, they could be kind of like an olive green color. And fired up, they're a black base animal, right?
Mhm.
So I see this a lot with those olive type super empty backs that when they misfire or they're not fully fired up, you'll see like their laterals and the rest of their body be pitch black, but then in between, like in the dorsal, it'll still be like a little bit green, and it almost
Mhm.
looks like there's like a thin layer of those orange or yellow markings that got erased, like the most thinnest layer that is still kind of there, but when it's fully fired up, the black kind of like overpowers it. I don't know if I'm making any
Okay.
sense, but it makes sense
Yeah.
in my mind. So when it's misfired, I'll see like the laterals be completely black. Man, I wish I would have. I wish I'll have to
I'm
send you guys a picture
I'm trying
afterwards.
to
But
see if I have another picture because I might have one. Keep talking. I'm looking to see if
yeah,
I can find one on this computer.
so like I see a lot of my super empty backs that are have that olivey color, is that they have like an olive top of the head and middle of the dorsal and then the black sides, but they're 100% super empty backs. I'll send you guys pictures afterwards, and then we can post them on our stories and stuff so people could see it.
Okay, I
I
don't
mean,
have
the
it here.
biggest indicator for me on this gecko is the pins. They're white. I can tell that from the photo.
Mhm.
Yeah, and even it creeps up to the crest, like to the tip of the
Yeah.
crest.
Mhm.
Awesome. So now we get into the discussion of empty back without pin or minimal pin, right? So this was hatched out of the pairing that produced a lot of empty backs, and one we'll look later, the red one that may be a super empty back. And Quincy and I was talking about this earlier, how it kind of has a pixelated look to it. So you can see a lot of it shoot up. You can kind of see how it V's down at the head a little bit. And I find the base
Mhm.
of the tail is kind of where you see it disappear a lot more in the pattern. So
Yeah, I
in
see what
theory, I'm thinking that this would be
I
one
had.
copy of the genes, the head empty back without the pinning.
So, so what are the parents to this animal?
So this is the one we were talking before we went live. So this is the parent to this animal is a phantom empty back with one copy, and the lily white I have to send you a picture after that I didn't
That,
think was
but
the empty back.
but that's the lily white that you said has like the spots down the dorsal.
Yes, yeah. So that would be the
Okay,
parents to this animal. So the
so
full sibling to this animal would be the red one we're going to look at later.
yeah, so I don't know. That one is hard. I I don't I don't
Now it
know.
did have siblings that didn't have that had actual pattern that weren't chewed up like this. So there were some that did not carry the het that still had like just a harlequin pattern on it. They were just tries. But this one I found interesting that I figured might be an example of empty back without pin.
You see, you're gonna confuse the shit out of people with this one, because this is a hard
Listen,
one.
well, this is Quincy knows. We've been talking about this. This has been a discussion online. It's like find examples. This is the closest example I can
Yeah.
find that I
No.
know has parents and siblings that have produced empty backs and so on. That was
Yeah.
very weird from the other ones that were non-empty back out of the hatchlings, right?
Yeah. Yeah. No, I see what you're saying, but it's still hard to distinguish. I see on the neck area there's like it almost seems like somebody erased a little bit of it, and towards the base of the tail, I could see what you're saying a bit, but I wouldn't be certain that that's a
Yeah.
het empty back.
Full disclosure, I did not sell this as a hat. This went to a pet home.
Sell it as a het empty back to the person that sold you that cappuccino.
Yeah.
So
Our Gecko Harmony says maybe pin is needed for empty back, and that's what we're trying to figure out right now. I feel like I have to put things to non-pinstripe, and you are a troublemaker, David.
Just messing around.
I know. Quincy, you had something to say.
yeah, so I'm in the same boat as you. I hatched two geckos not this past season, the season before, from that have empty back siblings, that have empty back parents, and they have no pins. But mine, instead of looking like yours does with the line going down, mine kind of looks like erased banding across the dorsal.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
those, I have one big male that I'm planning to breed this year and try to prove it out to be empty back or not. But it's completely pinless. It's basically like Harlequin empty back.
So
Yeah.
I can send you pictures after, because I do have siblings to this one still, that I never even thought might have empty back in them, but they have like full lines missing down its back. But they're not pinless, right? So they have kind of the broken pin throughout as well.
Okay.
Sorry, David, you had something to say.
No, I was gonna ask if those, so like Quinn was talking about this like empty kind of like streaks, bands across the dorsal. Was
Mhm.
that from, was like was either of the parents super, or were both parents hets, or one parent het?
Yeah, they were both hets.
Oh, they were
And the
both hets.
siblings came out as regular Super EB pins. I should have got a photo of him for you for today, but it's really odd. It really looks like a Harlequin with erased patches down the dorsal.
Yeah, because I have a gecko in my mind that I'm picturing as well,
Hmm.
that is similar in my collection. And I feel like I've seen you post pictures of animals that are similar to the one I'm thinking of, but I don't know if that's the one you're referring to. Did you have one that you're calling like Shatter or something like that?
Yeah, I mean, the Shatter project is separate. There's no empty back involved in that, though.
Okay,
That's
then
more like
they might,
heavy tiger.
yeah, heavy type. Okay, it might be different than what I'm thinking.
The Shatter
Yeah.
one's the one that's more connected right now with the pixel stuff, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. Now you're making me feel bad. I should have kept this one and put it to like something that actually was, super empty back with pins and see what I
Oh, I
got.
thought you had this.
No, I sold
Yeah,
this one.
Oh, man.
No, I
that's
should have
funny.
kept it. It's one of those things where you're like, oh man, regret it later.
Yeah.
It happens. So this is actually the mom to that first one we just saw, the one before it.
Hmm.
So she's a phantom empty back. You can kind of see the dashes near my finger on the tail. She has the two little equal sign thing, and she's produced a whole bunch of empty back hatchlings. So I
And the
thought,
male,
sorry, go ahead.
that you paired to her, was that produced that baby? Is it an empty back as well, or just
It,
a
it was
regular?
it was the tri lily.
Oh, oh, right. Okay,
Yeah, it
right.
was the tri lily. Yeah. So with her, I know, and this, some people I'm sure can um have similar experience to this. I know this is one of the geckos I got when I first got in, right? So I had no idea, empty back was. It's not something I really spotted in Phantom. So I find it's a little bit trickier to kind of see with Phantom. You can
Especially a
kind of,
phantom especially a phantom with a lot of tigering, like that one.
yeah, and she has a lot of pattern, right, on her. So and you can see it more when she's fired down. Um, but definitely she's produced some really cool empty back stuff. But yeah, I put her here as an example. What are you finding with your phantom empty backs? Like, are you finding that there's a similar look to them, or there's like quite a variation?
Yeah, I mean, you can see there the base color coming through at the base of the tail. I mean, it's harder to see on like yellow and red animals,
Mhm.
but I can, I would have identified this in my collection. I have some black phantoms that are super empty backs, and it's just like a faint shadow going down the dorsal. Those are hard to identify because the color is so close. Um, but yeah, there you can see the erased portion at the tail base.
How about you, David? Anything to add? Like, how do you have quite a few phantom empty backs in your collection, or are you not working at
No,
all with the phantom ones? Or
I don't have a like I don't have any groups geared towards phantom empty backs, but I do produce them. Uh, and yeah, I see a lot of variation on them, and I typically see so I'll see like like Quincy was saying, the shadow down the dorsal, and then in some of them that don't have perfect pinstripes, it like I have a clear example of one that had, like the dorsal, it had the pinstripes all the way, let's say, to the half of the body, and then the
Mhm.
rest of the half was not a lot of pinstriping, and the line was very defined. That shadow was very defined from the neck down towards the middle of the body, and then from there on after, where there was no pinstripes to hold it together and kind of like steer it, it kind of like just split off and did its own thing. So that's kind of like what happens there. Um, is that it kind of like it's just, all over the place.
Mhm. I think the next one might be a. Oh no! So that's one of her hatchlings. So this here is
Oh,
out of
so look.
this same pairing. So this is the same phantom that produced her and that lily white.
Okay, so you see what I was telling you that I see with the empty backs and the super empty backs, where at the bottom of the pinstripe scales by the tail base, there's always
Yep.
like some pinstripe scales missing, unless you stack pinstripe heavily. Um,
Mhm.
I see that so often that it's like, you know, animals that typically would have produce full pinstripes, when they're paired to an empty back, they'll have like these breaks in the pinstripe scales towards the bottom by the base of the tail. And you could see that on that animal right there. But in that animal, I think it's a super,
Okay.
because the head pattern's completely wiped out. There's very minimal limb pattern, and you could see the base color all the way throughout, from the bottom of the dorsal all the way to the middle to the top, and then ultimately to the head, which is wiped out of all orange or yellow pattern.
So that would mean that the lily would have a copy, right? If it's producing a super.
Yep.
Yeah, but again, this is
In
theory.
theory. In
I
theory.
would say I would say I would say that is a super, either a super stripe or a super empty. And then what you're seeing there in the kind of like in between, where there's more cream and it's not a straight line, it's because of the tigering that's interfering with that.
Mm.
Gotcha.
So this one's a full sibling to the pinless one.
Yeah.
Wow,
Hmm.
Yeah. This is full
yeah,
sibling. Same year.
Wow.
really
Which
cool.
is why I was thinking that the pinless one may be having a copy
Yeah.
of an empty back, right? Because a
Yeah.
lot of the hatchlings that came out that year, she laid 20 eggs that season. And I think
Wow.
I may have gotten 3 or 4 that weren't empty back, or at least don't look to be empty back. And that was her first season, 20 eggs. It's wild.
Nice.
And this is a sibling, a half sibling to that one. So this again would be the phantom. And I guess we'll see with phantom with empty back that you do see some of that pinning kind of come up the tail as well, where it's peeks through, right?
Yeah, look, and
With the
even
white.
in that gecko right there, on one side of the tail base, you see there's a break in the pinstripes.
Yeah.
And then you see like some of that shadow, kind of like that would be a het, but yeah, you could see that.
Yeah, I should have put another picture of this one as well. This one's tail is very, very bright white, and it has the little equal sign that's very visible, and another one further down the tail. So
Yeah,
yeah.
that equal sign that you're talking about might not be necessarily tied to the empty bag, but it could also be tied to the lateral stripes, like
Okay.
how strong the pinstripes are on the animals. But it could be, I don't know. I'm just saying, I'm just throwing something out there.
Yeah, interesting. I'm trying to remember where I heard that. I feel like it was one of the genetic talks with Little Monsters where they brought that up on empty back stuff. But again, like it's one of those things that's, it may be there, it may not be there. You can't really bank on it, right?
Yeah, a lot of
Especially if
this.
you're
Yeah,
saying you're not seeing it on yours, then definitely, and you have a whole bunch of empty back stuff. It's not
yeah,
something that you can really rely on.
yeah.
That
But
red one, Het Phantom, maybe Het EB looks more super in them. Okay. Yeah, because it
his
is a Het Phantom. This one.
so wait, what?
So he's saying that the red one, Het Phantom, maybe Het EB looks more super in them. So he's saying that one copy of the gene, if it has Het Phantom, that it'll tend to look like a super.
Yeah, it's an interesting point.
Maybe it
Yeah,
could.
because
That's a good point. It could interact. It could show itself in that way. Let's say.
yeah, it could be reducing a bit of the pattern.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. That's a good point. So now we're getting into the lily talk. So this one, and I don't know for sure, but I
I would
picked
say
this
for
one up.
sure.
I picked this one up thinking it would be one copy of Empty Back.
Yeah.
I would say for sure at least, yeah, I would say for sure it's
Mhm.
one copy.
Because you're
You could
seeing that
see
base pattern really come through the
Oh
dorsal,
yeah.
exactly,
right?
Yep.
exactly.
David, you've been working with lilies. Do you want to speak on Quincy? I'm not sure if you've been working with lilies and empty back. Maybe David could start. What have you been finding? Because I know there was a video a while back that you had, I think it was a few years ago, you had posted on YouTube where you were really hyped about empty back and lily white, and that you were like, I'm going to make a super empty back lily white. So you want to share where you're at on that?
Yeah. So like I said this in the beginning, or maybe it was backstage. May be able to produce a super empty back lily this year because I have het empty back lily to het empty backs, but for sure I'll know for next year. Like I'll produce them next year for sure.
Mm-hmm.
The only thing is, it could be confusing because the 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 lily, because it exaggerates the cream so much and the white, it wants to eat into that emptiness, right? So
Yeah.
where the empty back is trying to erase the middle, the lily wants to like overflow it, and so it's sometimes it's hard to see because I've produced het empty back lily whites that have like these, like it almost looks like spots, like just
Mm-hmm.
dark
Yes.
spots. Yeah, like dark
Yeah.
spots down the dorsal. And if I didn't know any better, or I didn't know the parents, yeah, similar to that.
Yep.
Yeah.
Like that's likely a het empty back. So if I didn't know any better, I would say, oh, that's just like a cool variation of lily or whatever.
Well,
But
and when this hatched out, it had a prominent line right down the center and all the way
yeah,
down the tail. And as
yep,
this grew, you could see the white, you could still see the line faint down the tail, but the
yep,
white started eating away into the center because you're seeing the drips, and now it's kind of coming in as well, right? So I'm
yep,
finding with the one copy of the gene, like anyways, in my experience with the lilies I've hatched out, they'll hatch out and it's very obvious when they hatch out because you can see that line. And
yes,
as
and
they
then it's
grow, it gets a little bit more difficult. So you kind of have to tag them right away.
yep. And
Yep.
by the way,
Same with this one.
yes, that's exactly right. And by the way, that's the same exact thing happens with high cream and high white animals. Doesn't have to be lily white. It works the same way. I remember, man, this was like, I'm telling you, like 2013 or something. I hatched out this super stripe, right? It was a het super stripe or a het empty back. And it's a very high cream animal. And I'm like, oh, that's so cool, super stripe, whatever. And then like that animal today you would not think it's anything het, empty back, or het superstripe. It's just like the cream has, as they get older, as we know, white and cream, it gets better with age, and it like expands, like that's why when you have drippy animals, you don't hatch out an animal and it looks drippy right away. It takes time for that to develop. So it's the same thing. It takes time for that to fill in that emptiness.
Mhm.
And that's what's going on there with your lilies, and that's what happened with that gecko that I was telling you of mine. That's just a cream. That's just a cream animal, cream dorsal.
Yeah. Crested Gecko Genetics is saying Phantom will probably make that work better. And we kind of had a chat backstage about it. And I think, and I'll bring this one up. So this is a sibling to those other lilies, but with a Phantom lily that was paired to that Phantom empty back. So this here is a Phantom lily, pos hexanthic, that I'm thinking could maybe have empty back in it, but it's and then with the hexanthic, I don't know, like sometimes you'll see like little things with that too if the het's there. So I don't know what we were talking about that, and this is the whole thing about we're not sure, right? Because we still have so many things to kind of work and grow up and prove out.
Yeah, that animal is interesting. It's a very nice animal. I personally think it's a phantom and not a super empty back, but it's a nice animal regardless.
Yeah, and I mean for this one, the only way I'm going to know is by pairing it once it's older and see if it produces empty backs with that are non-lily, right? Like the goal with this one is to prove it is to pair it to a super empty back down the
Yeah,
line.
that or just pair it to something with no empty back whatsoever. And if
Yeah.
it was a super, everything should come out empty back. Het
Come
empty back.
on, be a male. Because then I could do both.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. So that I think that's the last picture. And we've hit an hour. We're over an hour. That was a good discussion. So if anyone has any questions in the chat that you'd like David and Quincy to answer, I think that was a pretty good discussion with empty back. Is there anything last thoughts that you want to share that maybe we haven't touched? Is there projects that you're wanting to work on and see how empty back works with them, or
Well, now you put in my mind trying to make a lily white super empty back. I do have an empty back lily, so maybe I'll try to do that.
Yeah,
Yeah.
we'll all be trying to hit that either this year or next year.
Yeah,
Yeah. Maybe I'll make that this year, hopefully. Fingers crossed.
yeah,
Uh,
hopefully.
Yeah.
but I think I want to make some super empty backs with cappuccino and sable in it, just because they kind of exaggerate that white uh highlight of the crest and the pins. So I just think it'll
Mhm.
make some really cool animals. Like really dark animals with like really bright, exaggerated white down the crest and the pins. That's what I want to do.
Gecko Harmony is saying, you guys think high pattern super empties are possible?
Gecko Harmony. He was so Dan released the Gecko Kaleidoscope, and he was telling me to read
Yeah,
it before I did this, but I didn't get to read it, Dan. Sorry. It's fucking long, dude.
yeah,
But so I've been reading it like in pieces. So I think you could eventually, just like we were able to produce high pattern phantoms, where we see all that like portholing and high pattern that creeps up into the dorsal even. So just like we do it with the phantoms, I think we'll be able to do it with the super empties.
yeah, that's
What about
true.
you?
Stacking the white pattern over a couple
Yeah.
generations, hopefully be able to like cover the limbs and the sides of the body, but keep the dorsal completely erased. That would
Mm-hmm.
be really interesting.
Have you had any like animals with a high snowflake and stuff that you've worked into empty back projects? Like how does it impact things that kind
I
of
haven't.
just spread and have more white pattern? I'm wondering if that would maybe kind of, I always try to think of different ways and pick people's brains on that. Like even like when I'm talking about like xanthic, I'm like, how do you get more white into an xanthic without,
Oh, we're
having
gonna do
lily
it.
into it? Or,
We're gonna
like
do it.
what's the secret of it? And that's all
I'm
tr- trying to figure it out, right?
Crystal, I'm working on it. That's what I mean. The guys, the people in Korea, man, they're like with this particular project with high white axanthics that are not lily whites, they're much farther ahead than us. But
Mhm.
I'm working on it here, and same thing with super empty backs. Most super empty backs you see are either orange pattern, obviously orange yellow pattern, or tangerine. But very, 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 very few people have like paper white on their empty backs.
Mhm.
So not everybody's gonna start doing that. But
No, but that's a
that's
good question to have. The next question to feed off of this, because there was one I had shown earlier where the pattern is pink. And I've had some discussions with people on what makes pink pattern and that it may be tangerine
it
on
is.
a white, right? So
It's
then if
Typo.
tangerine.
you're yeah,
Yeah.
so then if you're using animals that have that into your projects, could you essentially remove that tangerine and have that white pattern?
Oh, definitely. Definitely.
Yeah,
Um,
I go ahead.
I think you showed one of my males earlier, like a hypo tangerine that was a single copy empty back.
Let me go find it.
He had a lot of pattern.
That
Him.
one.
Is
Yeah.
it him?
So
Okay.
stacking that would give a lot of pattern on the limbs and on the sides of the body.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that has tangerine over white pattern.
Okay. Now we just got to make it more of an empty back.
Yeah, make a super out of it. Yeah.
Make that back empty. Awesome. Anything else you want to share? Did we miss anything? Trying to think here. I think anyone have anything in the comments? It's been a little quiet. If you have any comments for the replay crew, whoever's coming back and missed the live, definitely drop it in the comments and we'll do our best to kind of, answer and give you some feedback on it. But I think this has been a great chat. I think it'll help people understand it better and be able to identify things in their collection a bit better. I know I'm very visual, and being able to see different examples and the explanation really helps, right? And I'm really excited to see some of the stuff that you guys are going to produce over the next couple of years. I want to see that super empty back lily.
Yeah, it's
Yeah,
gonna be
me too.
nice.
It's your gold standard Gecko Club announcement. You get to push something.
Let's
Go for it.
go.
Take the
So,
stage.
all right, so we're gonna do two gold standard gecko shows this year. The first one's gonna be at Flora Fauna in May, and we'll do crested geckos. I think I'm gonna insert a small section for gargoyle geckos at that show, but we're also gonna do another gold standard gecko club, and that's to be announced. Like where it's gonna be and all that. But yeah, I'm excited about it, man, because especially when we start talking about all this genetics and breeding and all
Mhm.
that, I just like start to like visualize, year after year the progression of these morphs, and I think we still have a lot of room for improvement.
You're gonna have so many more categories. You're gonna have
Yeah,
to.
Yeah.
yeah.
And I know I'm gonna be there trying to figure out how I can bring my animals from Canada to the States so I can participate.
Maybe one day we go to Canada. Give me a
Yeah,
couple years though.
maybe we can run it at the CRBE.
Yeah, yeah,
One
that'd be
big
fun.
show. That'd be
That'd be
fun.
fun.
And you can have Northern Gecko participate.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I'm sure they would do great.
Yeah. I think I saw they posted they're coming down to Tinley.
Yeah, they
Yeah.
typically go to Tinley. That's a good
Yeah.
show for them.
Yeah, well, maybe my husband and I can get our butts out to the States. We're talking about doing flora fauna. David, you're going to be there, I guess, with the Gold Standard Gecko
Yeah.
Club. And are you vending as well?
Yeah, well, there's no way I could manage doing Tiki's, Geckos, and Gold Standard.
Yeah.
So I'm just gonna do Gold Standard.
Okay. And Quincy, have you decided? Are you making it down or up for
Yes,
you?
up. Yeah, I'll be there for sure.
Cool. Awesome. Well, thanks so much for joining. Again, anyone has questions, pop it in the chat. And I think this was a really good discussion. And hope we can get to do tangerine one maybe next. We'll bring you on and start
Yes.
talking some
We
cool
should.
I'm pretty
We
hyped about
should.
tangerine stuff.
Me too.
Yeah.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. And we'll see you the next time. And I just got to find this close thing because I have too many videos now to pop up. All right. Thanks. And I'll see you guys backstage.
All right.
Yeah.
I'll be the sun. I'll be the stars in your sky. I'll be your gold as your beauty dies with you.